It's time for Behind the Hits, where great country songwriters talk about great country songs. On today's Best Country, proudly broadcasting on the American Forces Radio Network. I'm your host, Ty Hager, and this week on the show, we've got the writer of these tunes.
I'll begin to feel the chill of an early fall.
The secret of life is a good cup of coffee. Let freedom ring. Let the white dove sing.
We'll also do Songwriting 101 with hit songwriter and the author of 2 books on songwriting, Rand Bishop. That's coming up later in the hour, but right now, from our studio in Nashville, we're talking with hit songwriter, recording artist, and Nashville Songwriters Hall of Fame nominee, Gretchen Peters. Thank you so much for being on the show.
It's good to be here.
And first of all, you've got a little congrats in order. You were just nominated for the Nashville Songwriters Hall of Fame.
I was just stunned. There are a lot of my heroes in the Hall of Fame. Bob Dylan, Woody Guthrie, amazing songwriters. So it's quite an honor. I
believe I read that as of now, there are only like 16 women members.
It's amazing how few women are in the Songwriters Hall of Fame. I'm hoping that changes. By
at least one.
Well, by one, and then, hopefully more, because, female songwriters have really contributed a lot to music and to country music in particular. I'm not holding my breath because there are so many amazing writers nominated this time, and this is my first time to be eligible. So, we'll just have to see.
Because I guess the criteria is, and this just goes to show you how time flies, you have to have made your first major impact 20 years ago. Isn't that right?
I know. Yeah, 20 years. And I just can't really believe that much time has passed. But yes, I'm finally, I guess I'm an old timer. I'm damn near a native now.
Now, I was reading your bio, and as I was reading it, I was thinking, when I was 5 years old, I was eating dirt, and Gretchen was writing her first song.
Well, I didn't say it was a good song. It was just, it was just that I just had the creative impulse, and really in childhood anyway, it almost didn't matter for me what medium it was. I mean, I loved to write poems and write songs, and I like to paint, and I like to dance, and I like to do anything that allowed me to create something, to make something, and it almost didn't matter. And it wasn't really until a little bit later that I sort of focused on music. And I think part of that was, as you grow up, you just kind of realize what you're good at, for one thing, and you kind of maybe abandon the things that maybe you're not so good at, because I guess partly you're getting constant good feedback about, doing the things you're good at. And music seemed to be, for me, one of those things. And definitely, even more than music, writing.
And then I believe you were 19 when you won that, was it a songwriting or a song contest or something like that there in Colorado?
Well, it wasn't even really supposed to be a contest, but the local radio station in Boulder, Colorado, had what they called Boulder Music Weekend, because we had such a great live music scene there at the time. And I submitted a basement tape that I made, and they declared me the winner of this non-contest, just because they really loved the songs, and they loved this funky little basement tape that I had made. I'd recorded, songs on a cassette. This is how long ago we're talking, But it gave me a big boost of confidence, but it also gave me a performing career, in the sense that, I was 19 years old, and all of a sudden I could go to a local club, and say, I want to play, and I could get a gig. And that sort of launched my performing career as well, which I did then in Colorado for the next 10 years before I moved to Nashville.
Yeah, I was going to say, a lot of folks at that point would have said, I'm packing up and moving to Nashville.
the thing that really moved me to relocate myself to Nashville was when artists like Steve Earle, Nancy Griffith, and those kind of artists started getting record deals. I thought, okay, well, if there's a place for them, there might be a place for me, because, you know, these are people that have the same sensibility about songs that I have. They're kind of folkies, but they're country, and you know, it just kind of felt like I might fit at that point. And that wasn't until, you know, shortly before I did move here, which was in 1987.
And then how long was it after you moved to Nashville that you got the George Strait cut? Was that your first big hit?
It was my first big hit. I actually got a publishing deal within, this sounds amazing, but within 3 months of moving here. I was very lucky to have been able to talk to a couple of, well, 3 really key people who were all great producers, Tony Brown, Paul Worley, and Barry Beckett. And they all really encouraged me. And Tony Brown, as it turned out, who produced Steve Earle and Nancy Griffith records, he steered me to my first publisher. And within 3 months, I had a publishing deal. Now, you know, I was making, you know, bare minimum wage type, you know, money. But it was a publishing deal, and I had a publisher, and I had someone who would take my songs around. And it was about a year after that I got my first song cut, which was by George Jones, which was such a thrill. I can't even tell you. To have your very first song recorded by George Jones, it was amazing. It was not a single and it was not a hit, but it didn't matter to me, because it was just, you know, it was like getting God to stamp your passport, you know. And the George Strait song, The Chill of an Early Fall, came a couple of years after that.
Well, her old friend from her old end of town dropped by today. Oh, I begin to feel the chill of an early fall.
From the fall of 1991, actually the early fall, there was a chill. There's George Strait with a big hit written by Green Daniel, and my guest this week on Behind the Hits, Gretchen Peters. I would imagine that you arrived in Nashville with a whole bunch of songs that you had already written.
You know, I did bring some songs with me when I came, and not one of those songs ever got recorded. And it didn't take me too long after I had been here to figure out why. There was something that happened to me once I got here, and I was sort of immersed in the scene and the songs and the music. And I remember going to the Bluebird Cafe and hearing Don Schlitz sing The Gambler, which had been a huge, huge hit. And I sat there at the Bluebird and I listened to Don sing this song. I'd heard Kenny Rogers sing it, of course, a million times, but I'd never heard the songwriter sing it.
On a warm summer's evening, on a train bound for nowhere, met up with a gambler, oh, too tired to sleep.
And the words actually sunk in for the first time. Really, really sunk in. And I understood that every line was important. I just sort of internalized a lot of lessons about song structure and what makes a great song from just those kinds of experiences when I first moved here. And I think I just started writing much better songs. I think before I moved to Nashville, I was writing songs that I thought sounded like they could be hits. I was kind of imitating and, just trying to write something that sounded like what I was hearing on the radio. And once I got here, I just, like I said, I just absorbed some things about writing that for me were kind of the last little bit of information that I needed about to really start trying to write, start aiming for that target myself.
Don't need no copy of Vogue magazine. Don't need to dress like no beauty queen.
First big hit for Martina McBride. That one went to number 2 back in 1992 after hitting the top 10 for Patricia Conroy. on the Canadian chart.
They're not even a real country anyway.
Oh, yes, they are, and a damned fine country, too. It's where a lot of Americans get their prescription drugs. That's My Baby Loves Me, written by my guest this week on Behind the Hits, Gretchen Peters. You're listening to Behind the Hits on today's best country. Proud, honored, and thrilled to be broadcasting on the American Forces Radio Network. I'm your host, Ty Hager, and later on we'll do a segment of Songwriting 101 with Rand Bishop. But right now we're continuing with my guest, Gretchen Peters. Well, you know who you kind of remind me of as a writer? You remind me of my good friend Tony Arata.
But I'd have had to miss the day.
Oh, well, thank you. Tony is a brilliant writer, so I take that as a huge compliment.
Well, you write a lot by yourself, and you also paint these pictures. You tell these great stories.
Well, I think that my love of reading and writing in general, not just songwriting, kind of really informed my songwriting in the sense that and the other thing is, and I tell on occasion when I do songwriting seminars, I tell students this, movies too. I'm a huge movie fanatic, and I think my songwriting has a kind of a visual component to it. I tend to see songs that I'm working on very visually in terms of, if I'm writing a story about, a character, I can really see that character and, her settings and where she lives and what she looks like and all that sort of thing. And I think sometimes when you see songs visually, so to speak, you tend to have a natural inclination to put more detail in there. And I think detail is really what really captures people about, when you're telling them a story. Really painting a picture, involves, telling what that, where the crack in that coffee cup is and what she's looking at when she's thinking whatever she's thinking. And, all those little details are hugely important.
Mary was married with children, had the perfect suburban life. Let that pony run.
From January of 1993, there's Let That Pony Run, a top 5 hit for Pam Tillis, written by my guest this week on Behind the Hits, Gretchen Peters. We're talking with Gretchen from her studio in Nashville. Well, let's talk about Circus Girl. In 2010, CMT put out a list of the greatest hits compilations of the entire year. And that made the list, and you're with some names like Alan Jackson, Tim McGraw, Brad Paisley, Trace Adkins, and there's Circus Girl, Gretchen Peters.
I know. I was completely amazed by that.
I work the high wire in the center ring, defying gravity, that's my thing. Guess I never wanted no regular life. I couldn't stand to be nobody's wife. Some people tell me that I'm living their dream. Things in the circus ain't what they seem. Believe me, darling, it's a lonely world. It ain't easy for a circus girl.
I had a major label, career for one record. And it was, I'm proud of the record, but, it definitely did not work. I was not a mainstream country artist by any stretch. And I really actually knew that at the time the record was coming out, but I thought, well, these people seem to think this will work, so who am I, to say that it won't? But yeah, all those years later, I mean, the reason that I have this, and I hesitate to say it's not called the greatest hits, it's called the best of, and there's a reason for that. But all these years later, the reason I put that record out, I really didn't want to, or it hadn't occurred to me, but my label in Great Britain had said, it's time for you to do a compilation of best of. And I have a pretty successful recording career and touring career over there. And I thought, well, God, that's kind of boring. But, then I kind of got interested because we put out a double CD version of it, which has got, demos and all kinds of rarities. And that was a lot of fun for me. And it was a chance to kind of look back and go, okay, this is what I've done so far. So, I hadn't had that on my radar at all to put a best of compilation out because I haven't had hits as an artist per se. And to have that kind of recognition amidst all of those, hugely successful artists, it just kind of really blew me away. I don't even know what to really think about it, except that I guess it just kind of goes with my philosophy that if you just keep your head down and your nose to the ground and do the best work you can, ultimately, eventually, somebody's going to notice.
Couple of guys sitting around drinking down at the Starlight Bar. I don't want to get you too far.
Faith Hill from the spring of 1999 from her album Faith, There's the Secret of Life, which hit number 4 and was previously released on my guest Gretchen Peters' album of the same name, believe it or not, but I'm thinking a different kind of faith.
Brilliant!
Yeah, I don't think she named her album after Faith Hill. That would be crazy.
Brilliant!
Gretchen's version of that one is also on the aforementioned Circus Girl album, which you can find at GretchenPeters.com. You're listening to Behind the Hits, where great country songwriters talk about great country songs on today's best country. Proud and honored to be broadcasting on the American Forces Radio Network. I'm your host, Ty Hager, and I want to thank each and every one of our men and women in uniform around the world for keeping us safe.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And we'll have more with my guest, hit songwriter, recording artist, and Nashville Songwriters Hall of Fame nominee, Gretchen Peters. But first, whether you're an aspiring songwriter or just someone curious about how songs are made, and it's not in a factory, by the way, it's time for Songwriting 101 with hit songwriter and the author of 2 books on songwriting, Wren Bishop.
I love writing bridges. I seldom will ever say this song doesn't need a bridge, whereas you hear that time and time again. There are a lot of lazy writers out there who will just say, some writer in the room will invariably say, "Oh, this song don't need a bridge, do it," because he's in a hurry to get to happy hour. But it's always fun to try to write a great bridge. It's a great challenge because once again, you have even less language to work with in a bridge. But a bridge can do a lot of things. It takes on a role. First of all, musically, it relieves the musical mode. A really great bridge will break the musical mode that has come prior to it, so that when the music of the chorus returns after the bridge, it sounds fresh. Once again, if you've heard 2 choruses, it begins to sound a little stale the third time around. So a bridge can refresh the palette musically by going to new chord changes, possibly a slightly different feel, maybe halftime, maybe a little bit of a breakdown or whatever, or even to a more intense place, so that when that chorus comes back, it sounds fresh and new, and it's really welcome to the listener. So that's what a bridge does musically. It cleanses the palate so that chorus sounds and tastes great the last time around.
Wren Bishop's books on songwriting can be found at his website, randbishop.com. We're continuing with my guest this week on Behind the Hits, Gretchen Peters, and we left off talking about her success across the big pond.
It's been a huge blessing to me. It's given me, it's opened so many doors. We just did our first German tour in March, and it was such a success. I couldn't believe, we would show, I'd been to Germany a couple times, but I had never played there. And, to show up and have, sold out houses, I couldn't believe it. But for some reason, and I don't really know what it was, and it all started with England, really. I did my first tour in England in 1996, I think, and I just connected with them, and they connected with me somehow, and I don't even really know why, but I kept on going back, and I think that's a lot of it. I think just, making the effort to go back, and within a couple of years, I had really developed a good following there, and I just thought, it doesn't matter where you find your audience, wherever you find them, if they get what you're doing and they want to hear it, then go there. What difference does it make if you're, getting on a bus and going to Oklahoma City or getting on a plane and going to Gateshead, England? What difference does that make, really? So I just kept going back, and this last June, I played the Glastonbury Festival in England, which is, 200,000 people. It's the biggest festival in the world, I think. So it's been a pretty amazing story. And we've expanded into Europe. We play in the Netherlands and Germany and Scandinavia, and we're going to be back there again in March of 2012.
If heaven was an hour, it would be twilight, when the fireflies start their dancing on the lawn. I ain't afraid to die.
To date, the last top 40 country hit for Andy Griggs, that's If Heaven, which went to number 5 in 2005, a beautiful tune written by my guest this week on Behind the Hits, Gretchen Peters. Now, we mentioned earlier that you write a lot by yourself, but after Independence Day came out, which we will talk about in just a few minutes, you got a call from this Bryan Adams feller, and you guys have written together a lot.
It's been, 16, 17 years, and Bryan and I are dear friends. Actually, Bryan sang at my wedding last October. He flew in from wherever he was on the road and came and sang Heaven at Barry Walsh's in my wedding, which was incredible. I mean, there were people, looking up, and no one knew that he was going to do that. And people were looking up going, that guy sounds kind of like Bryan Adams. Wait a minute, what? It was pretty great. He's one of the most self-educated, incredibly intelligent and self-educated people that I've ever met. I mean, he basically dropped out of high school, but is maybe more well-read than, 95% of the people that I know. And he's very engaging, very bright, fascinating, interesting, and loads of fun, and a really lovely, lovely guy. And so we hit it off, and he kind of wore me down as far as my fear of co-writing. He just kind of wore me down until I really was comfortable, sitting in a room with him and beating around ideas, and I didn't, I sort of lost my self-consciousness and my fear about co-writing, at least with him.
Biggest lie you ever told, your deepest fear about growing old, the loneliest night you ever spent.
Trisha Yearwood, along with Don Henley, with the top 40 hit and the title track of Trisha's 2001 album Inside Out, and Trisha's second duet with the former Eagle. Bryan Adams also recorded that one and wrote it, one of many tunes co-written with my guest this week on Behind the Hits, Gretchen Peters. You're listening to Behind the Hits on today's Best Country. Proud, honored, and thrilled to be broadcasting on the American Forces Radio Network. I'm your host, Ty Hager, and we are talking from our Nashville studio with Gretchen Peters. All right, let's talk about Independence Day. That one took you, I understand, like 18 months to write?
It did. I hasten to say that I did not work on Independence Day, just steady on for 18 months.
Sure.
What happened was I couldn't really come to terms with what the story seemed to want to be about, and I was afraid of it. I kind of early on, I got the inclination that this was going to be a pretty dark story about a woman who's abused and can't seem to find any other way out other than the drastic, steps that she ultimately takes. But I was really kind of afraid of that, and I just thought, well, I want to find some other ending for this song. I want to find some other way. And so I picked it up and put it down and picked it up and put it down. A lot of times the song was sort of almost too big for me to figure out. And it was definitely also one of those songs that you hear songwriters talk about that I felt like had been sort of visited upon me. But, it came to me, and I was obliged to finish it, but I felt like it was almost bigger than me, and I didn't really know how. So that accounted for a lot of the time that it took for me to finish it. I was kind of afraid. And ultimately, thank goodness I seem to be able to listen to my instincts most of the time. And my gut was just telling me, you have to tell this story. This is the way this story goes. This is one person's story. It's not that you're condoning it or anything else. It's that you have to just report, this is what happened to this person. And once I kind of accepted that the song was telling me, this is the way it goes, this is the story, then I finished it. Then it was okay.
And then you took it to Martina McBride, and she said, yeah.
Well, I took it to my publisher at the time, who was Paul Worley, who was also Martina's producer. And I basically said, no one's going to ever cut this song, but I'm turning it in. Here it is.
Let freedom ring. Let the white dove sing. Let the whole world know that today is a day of reckoning.
And Martina was really a new artist. She had actually cut one song of mine on her previous album, but she hadn't really had a hit. And she was kind of a new, untested, untried artist who hadn't really had a lot of success at that point. Next thing I knew, she had recorded 2 of my songs on her next album, that one and My Baby Loves Me. And but like I said, she was a new and sort of untested artist. And I thought, well, how is this going to work? I mean, not only is this a risky song, but for a brand new artist, it's not somebody like Reba who could sort of say, well, I'm doing it, And the record came out, and My Baby Loves Me was the first single, and it was a big hit for her, which was great because it gave her, a real boost. And Independence Day, I think, was down the line somewhere. I think it maybe was the 3rd or maybe even the 4th single from that record. And it was met with a lot of resistance, even from her own record label. But she, God bless her, she was so sure about that song and so determined and so gutsy, really. And she insisted on keeping it on the record, and they did ultimately release it as a single, and it even met some resistance with some radio stations. But it was one of those wonderful instances, really, when the people responded so strongly that even the radio stations that were resistant, ultimately, most of them played it.
Well, about that time, I was living outside of Murfreesboro in Christiana, Tennessee. And I remember there was a lot of talk around town. It's like, hey, they're shooting a country music video here. And guess what? They're burning down a house. Yeah. It was very exciting.
Yeah. It was a powerful video, too. I'm not the biggest fan of videos, but I have to say, Deaton Flanagan made that video, and I actually had a little part in it. I sang at the very front of the video. There's a little section where the mother and the daughter are singing Amazing Grace, and I sang that. They brought a little girl in, and she and I sang that together as the mother and daughter. And then they showed me the video, and I wept. I just think I still, to this day, I saw it the other day, and I still think it's just one of the most powerful videos. And like I say, I'm not a huge fan of the format, because I like songs to give me my own picture in my own head, But I do have to say it's a beautiful, powerful piece of work.
And then it went on to win the CMA Song of the Year.
It did. It was an out-of-body experience, really.
And a lot of people, because it has had, the song has had such an impact over the years, a lot of people are under the mistaken impression that it was a huge number one smash, but it actually wasn't.
It squeaked into the top 10. But, you know, I think the thing that the lesson that I got from that is that the chart position, or at least, you know, having a number one record, which is, you know, kind of the goal that everybody wants, it really does not mean what you think it means. Because that song is still played every day on the radio. You know, I don't know how many years. What is it? 17 years?
It's a long time.
16 years. It's been a while, yeah. It's still played all the time on the radio, and it's stuck in people's, it somehow just, for whatever reason, it captured people's imagination and became a part of their lives. And not every number one song does that. Some number one songs you forget as soon as they're gone, and some you don't. And I feel very lucky to have written something that seems to have some kind of staying power. That doesn't always happen.
Well, she seemed alright by dawn's early light, though she looked a little worried and weak. She tried to pretend he wasn't drinking again, but Daddy left the proof on her cheek. It's Independence Day.
There it is from 1994, the CMA Song of the Year and Video of the Year from her album, The Way I Am. It's Independence Day, written by guess who? That's right, my guest on Behind the Hits, Gretchen Peters. So now, Gretchen, I'm guessing you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about your new album that's coming out, I think, in January?
Oh, I'd love to. Are you kidding? I'd love it.
Now, is this going to be all songs that no one's heard before?
Yes, well, it will be, unless you've been to a live show. I've done a couple of the songs from this new album, at shows. There's one song that's maybe 2 years old, so I've been doing that for a while, but it's going to be pretty much new material to everybody. Yeah. And,
I know what a tremendous, effort putting out a new record is, not only the recording, but everything that goes along with the business side of it. Are you, what point are you at now? Are you,
I thought, are you going to ask me, are you taking your vitamins?
Yeah.
Because that's what it takes.
Well, as much as you play out, I figure you've got to take a lot of vitamins anyway.
I do. And I'm no spring chicken either, let me tell you, Ty. Yeah, no, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. And people think when you're done with the album, then, okay, you know, the work's over. But that's when the work just begins. And, you know, in this day and age, in this climate, the way the music business is, you know, it's more uncertain than ever. It's harder than ever to get your message out, to get your music out. But I feel... I really, without overstating it, I really feel like these are the best songs I've ever written. So I'm absolutely determined to do whatever I can to make sure that it gets a fair shake out there. You know, I know it probably sounds like a cliche because every artist says, well, this new record is more me. It's the best thing I've ever done, you know, but I really feel like from a song standpoint, these are the strongest songs that I've ever written. So I am taking my vitamins. I am getting ready to work hard.
Well, Gretchen, thank you for taking the time to talk to me, and man, it's been a lovely conversation.
Same here. Thank you so much, Ty. I've enjoyed it.
She left the car in the driveway. She left the key in the door. So what do I care if you go?
From 1995's When Fallen Angels Fly, there's Patty Loveless and you don't even know who I am. I hate it when they call you the wrong name. Another big hit by my guest this week on Behind the Hits, Gretchen Peters. And that's going to wrap it up for another Behind the Hits. I'm your host, Ty Hager, and I, of course, want to thank my very special guest, the uber-talented Nashville Songwriters Hall of Fame nominee, Gretchen Peters. You can get Gretchen's albums, updates, and oh, so much more at her very cool website, GretchenPeters.com. Behind the Hits is produced by Bass Hackers Productions in association with Jagger Payton Radio, online at jaggerpayton.com.
Okay, then.
Co-produced and engineered by Steve Goody at Pitch Perfect Recording in Nashville. Check them out on the web at pitchperfectrecording.com.
Okay, then.
Theme music by Rebecca Kraft, produced by Steve Goody.
Okay, then.
Post-production assistance by Bill Livingston at Automatic Productions.
Okay, then.
And don't forget to check out our website where you can get my complete songwriter interviews, cool songwriter links, and more. It's BehindTheHitsRadio.com. And now for the legal stuff.
Behind the Hits is copyright 2011 Bass Ackwards Productions. Any unauthorized reproduction will earn you a noogie. No animals were harmed during the making of Behind the Hits unless you count that monkey that got in the studio, which we just shaved. Hey, wait a minute. We did not shave a monkey.